I'm sure you've all heard the term build back better. That was the mantra of COVID, right? Build back better. And I must tell you, I completely disagree. Have you heard about that global conference, the one where they're talking about all of this waste and what are they going to do, and transportation is an issue? Have you heard about that global conference? That's because it was in 1894. There was a global conference on horse manure. And, it was reported that London alone had 50,000 horses. It was the main mode of transportation. It was how people got around. And each horse produced 25 pounds of manure per day. And at 50,000 horses, that was 1.25 million pounds of manure per day in one city. It was a health hazard, people were getting sick, and they couldn't figure out, how are we going to solve this problem? Do we need a better horse? Do we need horses that don't produce manure? Do we need to find another mode of transportation? And enter the car. And all of that horse problem went away. But the funny thing is that we solved one problem and created another. So cars and transportation, they account for about 21% of global carbon emissions today. And it got me thinking about, how do we create new things, right? So let me ask you something. Did you know that 10% of global wealth, 75% of global wealth is owned by 10% of the people? 75% owned by 10%. And 38% of global wealth owned by 1% of the people. So let me ask you this. If you have children, if you had two children and you said to one, here's $38, and the other one, here's 62 cents, I wish you luck with that situation, because those children will fight. That's blatant inequality. And that is the system that we have. That is what our global economy is based on. It is based on this almost seesaw of the haves and the have-nots. And what we find ourselves in right now is that we are building our new economy on top of that existing infrastructure. And we have to have a different solution. So I'm going to tell you what that inequality looks like for me. Now, by every measure that you can measure a woman, I am a successful woman. I am a CEO. I am on several boards. I'm a UN Global Ambassador. I have 2 beautiful children. I have a wonderful husband. I'm even a 5-time marathoner. I am a successful woman. But let me tell you what becoming that successful woman comes with. Years ago, I got a beautiful offer for a job with a conglomerate. I can't name them because you'll hear this story. So I got a wonderful offer, but it wasn't enough money. And I said, can you up the offer? And they said, absolutely not. Cannot give you another dollar. This is all that has been budgeted. So I said, okay. I took the role. First day of work, I opened my beautiful office. I sit at my beautiful desk, and I opened the desk drawer. And in it was the offer letter to my predecessor. And in that offer letter to my predecessor, who had come and left within 3 months, they had offered him 20% more than they had offered me, the budget that they supposedly did not have. And because of how I had gained the information, I thought it distasteful to bring it up. So I said, okay, here's what I'll do. I will pay my dues. I will do the work, I'll achieve my objectives, and when it's time for review, we have the conversation again. So said, so done. Met my objectives, came time to review. They said, boy, fought me for 5%. That's all that the budget would possibly allow. And even though I knew that that was untrue, I did what most other women do. I was grateful for the opportunity, kept my mouth shut, and continued doing the work. And that is the reality of what you deal with and the inequality that is baked into the system that we're already operating with. You know, when I was a teenager and you had to pick subjects and I had to choose what I was going to do, I said, you know what, I'm definitely going to pick computer science and not typing because, you know, when I grow up, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to have a secretary, I'm not going to need to know how to type. Because in my mind, this whole thing of inequality between men and women was going to be solved. I mean, it was only a matter of time. But yet, if the UN is to be believed, it will take us not less than 200 years to close the gender inequality gap. And that brings me back to that seesaw that we're on with inequality. And for me, I wouldn't build anything on that kind of foundation because some of us are falling off. There are 3 things that climate change is getting fundamentally wrong. The first thing is the picture is way too complicated. We're getting people confused with all of the science. I get it, the science is great, but we need to simplify the message. The second thing is we're selling crisis and not hope. We're not telling people what they're running towards, but we're telling people what they're running from. And finally, and most fundamentally in my view, we are building this new economy on the back of the old economy that we are already quite certain does not work. It does not work for women. It does not work for people of color. It does not work for minorities. It does not work for people who live in the global south. It does not work. And we need a new construct. So what's the solution? My solution is burn it to the ground. And before you run out with your torches, let me tell you what I mean. When I say burn it to the ground, we can't build back better. There is no building back better. We have to build something that's new. We have to build an entirely new construct where there is equality, there is equity, there is balance, and everyone has an opportunity to be successful. So I will take those 3 problems, the problems of the complexity, the problems of the hope, and the problem of the inequity, and we'll deal with them from back to front. So on the problem of the inequity, let me give you an example in climate change. So the carbon in the atmosphere is produced mostly by the large countries in the global north. You have the US, the European Union, and China, producing most of the carbon in the atmosphere. And one of the ways that you can make money on climate action is you can create a project that, and sell carbon credits, right? Of the top 10 agencies in the world that certify, that you have to pay to certify carbon credits, about half are in the US and the other half are in the EU. That is the equivalent of somebody coming to your house, burgling your house, and then they show up the next morning with a tag that says insurance adjuster, and you have to justify to them that you have had losses so that you can then claim on your insurance for what you've lost. It is unjust, it is ridiculous, and it begs to be changed. But here is where I give you hope. What we know is, and what I see in my work, is that there is money for climate action, and there's money for lots of things. There's money for women, but that money rarely ever has to go to women-led institutions. There's money for the Caribbean, lots of money for the Caribbean. Not enough, but there's lots of money for the Caribbean. But that money is typically spent in the US and the EU and in Canada, providing services to the Caribbean. There is money for the global south. But when decisions about that money is being made, people from the global south are rarely in those rooms. And that's what we need to change. So here's where I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. And if you only do 3 things, then I say to you, you know what? Do all 3, do 1 of 3, and if you do that, for me, you will be burning the old establishment and creating something brand new. The first thing, and all 3 of them are going to seem counterproductive to climate change, and that's by design. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to turn on a light. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to open a door. And the third thing I want you to do is I want you to grab the wheel. Okay? Turn on a light, open a door, and grab the wheel. So when I say turn on a light, climate change is all about conservation, and we absolutely need to do that. You need to turn on your light. You need to figure out what are the opportunities that this thing presents for me. How do I educate myself? How do I get more involved? How do I become more aware of what is taking place and the opportunities that this presents for me as an individual? That is a really important component of seeking out the opportunities and turning on a light on what is happening with climate change. The second thing that I will ask you to do is to open a door. Now, what that looks like for me, I am often in rooms as the only woman, as the only black person, as the only person of color, as the only person from the global south. And when I am in those rooms, I tell you, I'm truly grateful for the opportunity, but I should never be the only one. And many times when I'm in those rooms, I ask, can I bring somebody along? And if I'm invited to something where decisions are being made and I cannot make it, I make it a point to recommend somebody else. And that's what I'm asking each of you to do. To when you are in a room and you are the only one, see if you can bring somebody along. And if you're in that room and you are in the majority, look around and see who's missing. Who's missing from this conversation? Who should be a part of this discussion and is absent? Because there are too many times that there are decisions about the Global South and there's nobody from the Global South in that discussion. There are discussions about women and there are no women in that discussion, and so on and so forth. So I ask you to open that door. Turn on your light and open a door. Open a door either for yourself or for someone else. And lastly, and most importantly, I ask you to grab the wheel. And when I say grab the wheel, it is this. Trillions of dollars are already being spent on this transition. And if you are not, as a person from the Global South, as a woman, as a person of color, as a black person, if you are not actively seeking out these opportunities, this will pass you by. So you need to be either thinking about what business can I start? What service can I offer? What can I do within my company that is within this space that is growing and burgeoning and changing everything as we know it? And if you're not doing that, you are not taking hold of the opportunity that the new economy presents. So if anyone should tell you that you don't deserve to be a part of the new economy, or that we should build back better and not build anew, forget that horse manure. Thank you.